So as I mentioned in class the other day, I wanted to share with you this exercise to understand media queries a little bit. And I'm also going to give you some readings so that we can determine when to use media queries and when we do not need to use media queries. But as for the exercise, I've gone ahead so that you didn't have to watch me type all of this, created a basic HTML document, HTML5, doctype HTML. I just gave it a title of Media Queries Test, and I also created a basic CSS file, which we're going to look at in a second, that I've linked called MediaQueryTest.css. And I went ahead and just put in, this is an H1, this is an H2, and I labeled each one so that if I were to look at this right now, in Chrome, we've got our basic H1, H2, etc., etc. So I want to come over to the CSS, which is where we're going to actually build our media queries. And again, I created an empty CSS document. And all I'm going to add right now is @media. So I need to define what media we're trying to contact. Now I'm going to recommend that we work from phone size up to main size. In the reading, it'll explain a little bit more about that, but the idea is to make the phone CSS as light as possible. More about that later. First, let's just get this media query working. So because I'm working from small to large, I'm going to work with minimum width. So I'm going to say at min width. And by the way, I am working in Dreamweaver just because that's what I have to hand, but you can do this certainly in any text editor or whatever coding program you prefer. And I'm going to type in 320 pixels. Now this is typical size for a phone. There's hundreds and hundreds of these breakpoints, but we'll talk about that later. We're really going to focus on 2 or 3. So then once I type my media query, I want to have an open and close curly brackets. And anything that I want to change, I will go ahead and put inside of these curly brackets. So I'm going to just use the body background color as an example. So inside I type as if I'm not in the middle of a media query. I type my normal CSS. So what I want to change is the background color because that's a nice, easy thing to see real quickly when we do a media query. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the names, and I'm going to start with red. Now just for speed's sake, I'm going to copy and paste this 2 more times, and I'm just going to change it so that it's going to change to blue when we hit 480, which is another common breakpoint, and then it's going to change to green when we get to 768 pixels. So all that's going to do is as we open the browser window, it's going to start out, if we open a small window at red, once the browser window exceeds 480, it's going to turn blue, and once the browser window exceeds 767, it should turn green. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm just going to go ahead and preview in Chrome. And here you can see this is pretty much a full desktop size. As I close the window, somewhere about there we go. So this is a minimum once it gets over 7, so this must be 768 or greater. And then we're going below 767, it turns blue. And then when we get way down here to 320, it should turn red. So this is an oversimplification, perhaps, of what a media query is, but you can see that it pretty much works. Let's go back to Dreamweaver for a second, and let's modify one more thing. So let's say we want our H1 to change the color of the text to white. Now, notice if I just have it at a minimum of 320 and I change it to white, what do you think will happen to the others? If you guessed that it's going to remain white, you are correct. So let's take a look at that. Let's test it again. Have to test from the HTML. And there it is white. And it will stay white because we have not told it to change at any of the other sizes. Okay, so going forward, for those of you who aren't used to looking at it in this format, I'm going to break it up to a format that you might be a little more familiar with. And in some ways that makes it a little easier. You can see the opening and closing brackets. So if I wanted to add more CSS, you can see these brackets on their separate lines. Might make it a little easier to see. Okay, so that may be what you're more familiar with. So let's go ahead and modify the H1s for the others now that we saw that the white will carry through if we don't modify it going forward. So let's make the, at a minimum of 480, let's have it change to yellow. This is going to be so gorgeous. And then when it's on the green, let's have it change to pink. I'm sure this will just be stunning. And let's preview in Google Chrome. Here's my red with white. As we open it, we should get to see blue with yellow, if I remember correctly. Oh, nice. And then as we get further, green with pink. So essentially what we may do for our project is build our first style sheet entirely based on this min width, so that if it's on a phone, it does not even need to load anything beyond that, and then we'll deal with our larger formats after that. So I'll go ahead and give this a try, and hopefully this will help you to understand what a media query actually is doing and how you could write a very simple media query. See you soon.